I'm happy to welcome you to my channel. I hope this story brings you something special and leaves a pleasant impression deep inside you. They met where people who had long unlearned to believe in coincidences usually meet, at a corporate party. Two companies shared one hotel hall, one cover band, and one bar counter, as if mutually justifying their need for light and noise. She had arrived from Warsaw on a business trip, he from Toronto for a product launch. Her name was Elena Park, his, Mason Reed, on the badges, last names, positions, departments. In their looks, fatigue with a mix of polite excitement that belongs to the formats networking, and we are all here for a common cause. "What will you have?" asked Mason when she hesitated a little by the bar. "Something safe," Elena smiled. "For example, water with ice that the bartender will call a cocktail. Then 2 sedatives for introverts." He winked at the bartender. "I'm Mason." Elena. They laughed exactly enough not to seem too eager to each other. They talked exactly enough not to miss the ease that happens in the first minutes of any dialogue. About the song the band played too fast. About how it's always a little cold in large halls. About the hotel carpet that seemed to have seen more confessions than any smoking booth. Then they exchanged contacts. Not with that floor that smells of promises, but with the honest thought it was pleasant. Perhaps we'll see each other again by correspondence. They went their separate ways the next day, to different time zones, different schedules, different bosses' demands. And it was precisely the difference that, strangely, connected them. The messages began with polite, "How was your flight?" and "Did you manage to sleep?" and grew into tiny reports about weekdays. He sent videos from the metro. "Here's the man who reads a newspaper from the 1970s every day." She, photos of morning coffee on the windowsill. "My micro reward for not losing my temper at the meeting." Slowly, like leaves in September, their conversations grew heavier with meaning. Night Split in Two appeared when one, "Are you still awake?" pulls behind it an hour of honest paragraphs. They spoke with voices they did not yet know in person. About the fear of failing when everyone considers you successful. About how on weekends the absence of mom's soup hurts. About how important it is to have a person to whom you can write, "I feel cramped inside myself today," and not explain the details. At some point they noticed that mornings had become more patient, because somewhere on the other end of the map, there was a screen that would answer with warmth. Months passed. They lacked time, flights, and coincidences all the time. They planned meetings and postponed them. They marked cities on the map and lost opportunities. They were people with calendars where the urgent always eats the important. And suddenly, on one of the rainy Thursdays, Elena wrote, "I bought a ticket. And right away, don't be scared. And after 3 dots more, I'm flying to you." Mason read this message 3 times, each time savoring the surprise like the first sip of coffee at the right temperature. He tried to answer with something measuredly practical. "Send the flight details. I'll pick you up at the airport." But in fact he wanted to write, "Thank you for daring to make the step I didn't dare to." She arrived without an announcement to the world, but with a great internal drumbeat. He met her with a sign E, to hide from other eyes the name he had been pronouncing in the quiet of his kitchen in recent months. Their first offline conversation turned out to be as if the 4th or 5th. No, what do you do? Only, remember that story about the neighbor with the saxophone? And I brought you to try that cinnamon pie. And let's not make this day an example. Let it be simply us. For 2 days the city seemed a conspirator. It slipped them warm coffee shops, quiet squares, taxis without small talk, and films without disappointment. They walked not longer but the right routes, On Sunday, Mason decided to show Elena his bar, a place with a wooden counter and lamps like in a grandmother's kitchen. There he introduced her to his best friend, Amir Haddad, tall, warm, with a look that seems to constantly see a little more joy in the world than the rest. "So you're the very Elena from the messages?" Amir smiled and, as if in passing, brought them bowls of hummus. "And you're the very Amir who saves Mason from self-circuits," she replied. The conversation flowed easily, as it should flow between three people who are not competing for the right to be the main ones. Amir was one of those who knows how to catch a thought and put it where it feels comfortable. He laughed at a different frequency than Mason. He spoke other words, warmer, more musical. And somewhere between the story about his Syrian grandfather the barber and the joke that the best decisions come while washing dishes, Elena felt something she had not planned. A shift. Light, like a boat not tied to the shore. Uninvited, dangerous. She pushed it away from herself. No. In the following days, restraint sat next to her like a strict aunt. It ordered, "Don't make things up. You came to Mason. Be grateful. Don't spoil." But the heart is not an organ that signs a contract with the mind. It looks at the Boeing from the terminal window and decides it is already flying. Amir settled in her thoughts like music you hear even after the player is turned off. Elena pushed the melody away, returned to what was real between her and Mason. Long letters, honesty, habits, shared laughter over little things, and still caught herself remembering the friend's gestures without having the right to. She tried to return the ship to the port. More silence, more walks with Mason, more shared photos that she would not be ashamed to show herself in a year. But one evening, when they were sitting on the windowsill with teapots and watching how the streetlights draw geometry on the wet asphalt, she understood either the truth or poison herself. And she spoke, first to him, to Mason. "I have something very unpleasant that I must say." She began so directly that he immediately became calmer than he had been a minute before. "Say it." He did not move from his place. He only set down the cup. I... She looked for a way not to betray herself also in the wording. "I feel for Amir something I have no right to feel." The silence after this phrase was neat, like a clean plate. Mason looked at her as if he were holding a porcelain cup and deciding whether he could carry it. "Thank you for saying it," he said at last. "It hurts. And at the same time, it's honest. And I respect both." He spoke evenly, but inside something was collapsing, like an old bookcase. The feeling of betrayal walked around the room like the shadow of a car outside the window, now sharply, now almost imperceptibly. He felt a wave rising, the one that decides for you. Enough. That's it. But to his own surprise, he did not want to call an ambulance in the form of pride. He remembered all the months of their messages, all the funny incidents and heavy pauses, and realized that he was not ready to pass his place in her life to another just like that. Even if that other was a good man. "I will fight for us," Mason said so calmly that Elena even looked at him. "Not because you are a thing, not because you are a prize, but because I know what kind of love I can give you. I have already given it, with words, with attention, with the way I listened and the way I was silent when it was necessary to be silent. I am not competing with Amir. I will simply show you us." In the following days, he did not play the movie hero. He did not give fireworks. He did what he did best. He was present. He appeared in the right places and times, not to control, but to lend a shoulder where the air becomes thinner. He took her to the exhibition she had long wanted to see, but was ashamed to admit she loved collages more than serious painting. He found a coffee shop where the barista remembered her drink from the first time. He offered silent walks where the city stopped seeming loud. He compiled playlists in which he imperceptibly hid their memories. That song from the corporate party, that melody from her video from Warsaw, the sound of the metro, which he had once recorded on a voice recorder. And most importantly, he talked about his fears, about jealousy, about how painful it was for him to hear her confession, and how at the same time he felt relief, because their we had withstood the meeting with the truth. Elena watched this and learned from Mason a new honesty, the kind that does not hide ultimatums inside itself. Amir did not disappear from their life at once. He was Mason's friend, and that did not change from the fact that Elena's heart was temporarily unruly. Amir behaved with dignity. He kept respect and distance, sometimes wrote Mason short, "How are you?" and sometimes was silent for weeks. He did not invite Elena for talks to figure out what's what, did not press with signs of fate. And it was precisely this, the dignity of all three, that created among them a space in which the decision ripened not from despair, but from maturity. One evening, Elena realized that the music in her head had changed. Amir's motif stopped being intrusive, like a jingle. It became what it should be, a beautiful track in the big playlist of life, which will turn on from time to time by chance, and this will not destroy anything. She saw that what had enchanted her in him was not eternity, but bright attention and lightness, those traits that one can love in a person without claiming they're always. And with Mason, she had something else. A shared language in which one can speak about the difficult, shared habits that make a house a home, a shared story that both are not afraid to reread, because there is no lie in it. She said to Mason, "I want to stay with you. I realize that my infatuation is not a betrayal if I am honest, but it is not my path either. My path is you, not because you hold me, but because you let go when I had to return by myself." They went to Amir together, and not for a scene, not for a dramatic gesture, but to be adults. Elena apologized for the pain she could have caused and thanked him for the bright part of this story, the one in which she found in herself the ability not to lie. Amir nodded, hugged Mason, and said what friends who know how to be friends say. "Take care of each other. I'm here when you need to substitute a yoga pose or watch over the coffee, and also when you need to be reminded of how you laugh." After that, life did not become smooth at once. More than once they still stumbled on what if, reread correspondence, and caught themselves wanting to make a myth out of past days. But they chose another practice: transparency agreements. 3 simple rules appeared in their home. First, to say out loud when noise begins in the heart. Second, not to make accidental emotions into heroes, neither oneself nor others. Third, to remember that love is not only about I want, but also about I take responsibility. Mason admitted that he had almost been afraid of losing the ability to trust. Elena, that she had been afraid of her own strength and her own freedom. They learned anew the simple things: cooking soup, doing the laundry, buying flowers, just because, putting their phones away at 9 in the evening to listen not to the world, but to each other. The love Mason had promised to show turned out not to be fireworks, but the light of a nightlight, consistent, warm, not blinding, the kind that allows you to see the way to the kitchen at night and not bump into the corner. Half a year later, they stood on the embankment. The wind rocked the water. The city breathed with streetlights, and Elena suddenly said, "I am grateful to myself for that ticket without warning. It brought me not only to you, but to the version of me who is not afraid of the truth. And I am grateful to myself for not playing at pride, Mason answered quietly. Because pride is always a short distance. I want a long one. They laughed, because the word sounded too beautiful for two people in jackets with thermal mugs instead of glasses. Then they returned home, where a list with 3 items hung on the refrigerator: milk, lemons, laughter, and under it, a small asterisk in Elena's hand, and honesty. Elena knew someday they would again go to different countries, because work sometimes has its way. She knew somewhere at some corporate party, someone would again laugh not with their own laugh and look for a safe person by the bar. She knew Amir would remain a friend, the one who does not take away but adds. But the main thing, she knew that if someday her heart again began to play someone else's motif, she would come home with it. Because now she had a home where such motifs are not feared, where they are listened to together, and then decided whether they are about love or simply about the weather. Meanwhile, they cooked pasta and argued whether to add a little pasta water to the sauce, washed sweaters that smelled of rain, listened to a playlist where the first song was always from that night at the corporate party, and went to sleep with the feeling that together is a verb in the present tense, which they had finally learned correctly. The story did not end. It moved into its most interesting phase, the routine one, where the biggest intrigues hide in small things. Whose donuts will rise higher? Who will be the first to apologize? Whom to call when it gets eerie? Their love proved nothing to the world. It proved something only to them, that choosing every day weighs more than the accident of one evening. That to fight is not a war against someone, but work for us. And that if anyone takes root in the heart, let it be the habit of telling the truth for their small joint anniversary they dressed again, as for a corporate party, as a sign that they remember where it all began. They came to the same bar, laughed at the same lamps, and ordered a sedative for introverts, water with ice, which the bartender probably still calls a cocktail. And Mason raised his glass and said the simple thing, to the courage to take first steps, and to the courage not to retreat, added Elena. Amir came later, with a new story about his grandfather, the barber, with the same dignity in his gaze. The 3 of them sat and talked for a long time, not about the past, but about what had always been more important among them, about life that must be lived honestly to preserve inside oneself a place for love. And then, there was an evening that did not get a climax. Only warmth. Only 3 laughs, different to the ear but equally genuine. Only a city that pretended not to know their story, although it had been its attentive witness. And only that simple certainty that the stories worth voicing are not only those where it was hard, but we stood firm, but also those where it was honest, and we chose each other again.